Hey, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, welcome, everybody. Welcome those repeat people that are coming back. I'm seeing the numbers jump. Welcome to anybody new to the show. Okay, everybody, you see Lauren's name here, and Lauren is here, but I want everybody to give some love to Lauren in the chat. She has her voice issue. She can't hear. Remember last week the technology wouldn't let her voice be heard. Well, unfortunately, she has laryngitis this morning. Okay. She's still with us. She is putting the links in. She's just my faithful, always there. It's amazing. I just love her to death, but she is not feeling better. So, everybody, there we go, Lauren. Lots of loves and hearts in the chat. She needs a definite little boost of energy, guys. Okay, so with that, obviously we're not going to have the SBDC intro, so I'm just going to say that SBDC is a organization that you're all familiar with. If you're not, it's a wonderful organization that I have been involved with over a decade. I think I'm going on 2 decades. And what it does is it helps small companies with webinars. The show is supported by SBDC and also one-on-one advising, which I'm an advisor. So therefore, if you ever want to reach out and have a one-on-one with me, you can do so. Lauren puts her email in the chat. If you need to sign up as a client, you want more information, you want to get in touch with me, Lauren is out there. She's the conduit. Her email will be in the chat to get in touch with her. So the one thing I like to mention about SBDC people too, that's really kind of unusual is most of us, if not all, advisors are like myself. I have my own company. I work with the SBDC with a long history and background of working with companies. So these are paid advisors that have their own companies, have their own experience. You're getting the best of the best, the cream of the top, because you're people that have walked the walk, talked the talk. So I like to add that. So I know I didn't do as a good of a job as Lauren usually does with the intro, but that was my best shot at it this morning. Okay, guys, we got a lot going on today, so let me go ahead and get started with this. Little bit about me. You guys know me by now. You see me everywhere, so I'm not going to delve into that. I put my slides in a little bit of a different order because I want to be able to share a couple screens with you. So I'm repeating the financial literacy series for February. Here's my schedule. And what I've also decided to do is I'm repeating the best legal structure for my company and what are the tax advantages. That is March 12th, 9 to 10. Now, for this last one, there was some confusion on time. I might have posted the wrong time. SBDC, somehow we all got into the wrong time. We had about 253 people sign up. I know people at varying times. So if you tried to get on and you didn't see the webinar happening because you had the wrong time, know that you can jump in March. And because of the high demand for this, I'm going to go ahead and offer this on a monthly basis for a while. My upcoming shows next week, I have Bethany Christopher. She started Lifesaver Education and took it to a high degree of success and then recently sold it. And I've asked her to come on and tell that story because many of you are either looking at selling a company or you're thinking, well, if down the road I want to sell my company, what does that look like? How do you grow it to a point and what do you do to get ready if you're wanting to sell it? So I thought her story and that journey from the beginning to the selling is a fascinating story that everybody likes to at least hear about to have a better understanding of how that actually works. Then the following week, I'm going to have our famous Deborah Darris come back on, and she's going to talk about a few select AI tools. We're going to focus on just a few that she feels as though, a lot of businesses could take advantage of. And that's what we're going to talk about at that time. Now, this is a slide I'm going to keep up. I don't have enough time to go into full depth on this, but it's a shout out to everybody. I want you guys to be aware of this. So FinCEN is a bureau of the U.S. Department of Treasury, and where you would have or probably would not have heard about them is they're very involved in laundering of money and, keeping tabs on what's happening within that world, or that's my, slang way of explaining a long paragraph. Now, why am I telling you this about? Because FinCEN has started a new reporting requirement for most companies that are probably listening to me today. If you're a sole prop, no, close your ears. You're not affected. Sole props, no. But if you're an LLC or a corporation, you very much may be considered what's a reporting company. I'm going to get into some more depth on this as time goes on. I just want to keep doing an awareness to make people aware of it. And Lauren's putting that link in the chat right now. But a reporting company created or registered to do business before January 1st 2024 will have the whole year till next year to do it. But the key to know that if you are considered a reporting company and you're created or registered in 2024, you're only going to have 90 days, okay? And if you're a reporting company created or registered on January 2025, it's going to go down to 30 days. But I really want to focus on this 2024 90 days, because if you're starting your LLC in January, you got 90 days to do this, and many are not aware of it. And from my understanding, the fines are hefty. It's like 500 a day up to 10,000. So I'm trying to do a shout out to everybody in awareness. It's a pretty simple process to register and fill out the forms. I am going to be creating screenshots of it and be able to share that. I might be doing a separate webinar on it as well. But right now, my big goal is to have an awareness of it, okay? So what I want to share with you next is kind of a cool little thing to get your attention about our discussion today. So we're looking at a little financial model, and I'm not trying to make anything big and scary here, guys. So just kind of sit back and listen to what I'm mentioning here, because it's kind of a intro to our guest and our discussion. So our discussion today is going to involve about having to hire a person. What does it cost to hire a person? What does it require from government regulation? What do I have to do to set up payroll? All the steps that if you say, okay, I don't have any employees, I'm wanting to hire one employee, what do I need to do? We're going to really delve into that. I wanted to just show you something really quick and fancy type thing, not fancy, I should say, to demonstrate something. And let me demonstrate it and then I'll explain it. So just follow me for a second. Bear with me and stay with me. Say I have a company, and this is so simple, it's ridiculous. It's so simple, it's ridiculous. It's one of these back of the envelopes where I show you a cool little, what did they call them? Parlor tricks. I'm showing you a parlor trick. This is the CFO parlor trick, okay? So say I have a widget I'm selling and I sell it for $10, and say it cost $5 to produce, okay? Just let's use these numbers. And let's just say I sell one. Let's just start with one. So if I take the selling price of 10, that's what I'm selling it for, and I only sold one, what is my revenue? 10. I then have to produce one, right? So if I take one times 5, you can see they light up. My cost of goods 5. Pretty simple so far, right? And then say I have these rent payments, made up all these numbers this morning, just pulled them out of you know where. And of course, you're going to have more overhead. This is simplified. This is my parlor trick. Okay. So I have total expenses of 37. So of course I got a loss because I can't just sell one of $32. The red with the parentheses is a negative number. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to say, how many do I have to sell to be $1 profitable? This is the way that you want to look at it, not what your gross profit, not, what your revenue is. This is the question you first want to ask. I already put the numbers in to speed this up. So I know I have to sell 8. So if you look, if I put in 8, all I did is I got this to do the math. So if I sell 8, it's $80 in revenue. Just did the math. That gives me a net income about 3. So I know, okay, I need to sell at least 8 of these widgets to be $1 profitable, or close to $1 as I have here. My next question, how many do I have to sell to meet my desired income? So say my desired income is 300. We're making this up. Well, what would I have to sell? 68. I did the math. Brings me at 303. So right away, I got to say, well, do I have the infrastructure to support 68 being sold? Do I need to have more marketing? Do I need to have more rent? What do I need to have? Well, then I might say, well, I need to hire somebody, okay? Made up numbers here. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to hire somebody and that's going to be 200, right? Well, I have to go back and ask the same questions again. Well, if I hire somebody, how many do I have to sell to be $1 profitable? Well, I did the numbers ahead, so I didn't take up the time doing that. It's 48. So you see, instead of selling 8, I now have to sell 48. Well, what about my desired income of 300? Well, I have to sell 108. There's my 300. So instead of 68, I have to sell 108. Well, I got to have a reality check. Can I sell 108 units now? Before it was 68, but can I sell 108? No, I probably have to increase marketing. I have to increase this. I have to increase that. So I actually have to sell more units. Well, then I can go, I don't know if I can get to that sales number. I'm not sure I can get there. That's quite a jump, right? What are my other options? Well, what if I just change my price from $10 to 12, even if it lowers the demand? What happens? Well, how many units do I have to sell to be $1 profitable? Only 6. How many units do I have to sell to get my desired income? Only 49. So you can see that this is what I sold before to reach my outcome with no employee. This is what I have to sell with an employee. This is what I have to sell if I just merely increased my selling price and maybe lowered demand. So what am I saying? What is the summary here? I'm saying do the math first, understand the sales requirement when hiring or increasing any expense, okay? And know that there is always one more choice. Don't follow blindly. Now, am I saying you should or should not hire? No, please don't say, Lori says you should never hire, you should always increase the sell price. No, I'm saying there's a financial mathematical equation, and it will give you an awareness. It will give you an understanding. You'll know if that crevasse you have to jump over is maybe so wide that you're better to pull back for a little bit before jumping. So you're going into it with a conscious awareness. That's all I'm trying to say. That's my only point. So with this conscious awareness in mind, that brings me to my guest, my repeat champion guest, Xiomara Palma, which is the founder and CEO of Solvit HR, which is a certified human resources professional with over 15 years of HR experience across multiple industries. Xiomara specializes in helping small businesses remain in compliance with workplace regulations. She is my favorite HR person, my absolute favorite go-to on all topics HR. And I'm so glad. Xiomara, welcome to the show. You are the repeat champion because I have you on all the time.
Well,
So,
thank you, Lori. Yes,
so the
such an
good
honor.
thing, and here's where your challenge is, as you could see from my little demonstration, I gave a little quick consciousness awareness of the numbers. You're
Mhm.
going to give us a consciousness awareness of what it all involves. So we can now look before we go over that crevasse and say, well, the numbers may or may not support it, but what am I getting myself into? And that's the goal of today. So, Xiomara, I want to start with, for anybody who isn't familiar with you, I know you so much, our audience knows you so much, I can almost go too fast and say, okay, let's get into it. But let's stop and at least tell us a little bit about yourself and how you come across with so much information that you have, your wealth of information.
Well, thank you, Lori. Yeah, I've been doing human resources for about 17 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. It is one of my passions. I've worked obviously in-house HR, corporate, and many institutions. And one job I had was working with small businesses and really supporting them. And there I really got to see and find my passion, because I really got to see the small businesses were the most vulnerable. And yet the ones with the least resources and the least informed about labor laws, regulations, they go into effect like at least twice a year, right? January 1st, we get new laws, sometimes July 1st, sometimes we get them in the middle of the year somewhere. And, there's not a lot of resources where small businesses can find information about what applies to them.
And correct information too. Yeah.
Right. So, I really truly found my passion there. And I always, since day one, since I graduated college, I had this vision in my mind. Like I always wanted to be a consultant. I always wanted to help like organizations just improve the workplace. That was kind of my vision. I was going for like industrial psychology at the time. And then, just found HR, sister discipline, right? And just totally fell in love, with it, and decided to venture on my own. And here I am, supporting small businesses. I'm really happy doing what I do, and I'm really happy to be here with everyone today.
Well, that's why we resonate so much, because we have the same kind of history, background, love to be working with small companies. SBDC gives us that platform, which I want to take a moment to shout out to Pasadena. If Annie, if you're in the audience, make sure anything coming up with Xiomara's there, all her information. Xiomara is an advisor with the Pasadena SBDC, so you guys can reach out to her, and she has also always these great webinars that she gives. I just wanted to make mention to that. So, Xiomara, as we go from 0 to 1 employee, I feel like we can't begin without talking about AB5. So, for those especially that may not be aware of it, because AB5 to me is the trigger that is causing more people to go from 0 to 1 employee that would not have been. That's really why this is a key issue. So, can you kind of get the ball rolling and talk a little bit about AB5 and why it's causing the 0 to 1 employee?
Yes. So back in 2020, before the pandemic, we had January 1, right? New laws going to effect. We had this law called Assembly Bill 5, with essentially develop a new test to be able to classify a worker as an independent contractor. Prior to that, we had already a test, which was known as the Borrello test, and that focused on the exertion of control over a worker. But what this AB5 did, it created a new criteria. So it created the ABC test. So in order to classify someone as an independent contractor, you got to make sure that the criteria are met. So number one, that they're free of control from the employer, right? You're not telling them when to show up to work. You're not creating their schedule. You're not providing the tools that they need to perform the job. They truly are independent, in an independent established occupation. The second one is that they have to perform work that is outside of the business. So what that means is, if you are a perfect example I have, actually someone reached out. I mean, this is always a hot topic. So someone reached out about they're a janitorial company, and from time to time they also employ plumbers. And they found this great person that's an independent contractor,
right?
That's also a plumber. And they wanted to bring them on board and say, well, I'm going to subcontract this person because I need the help. So essentially, that person is still performing work that is aligned with the business because they also employ plumbers. So unfortunately, they would not meet that criteria, right? So the person needs to be performing work that is outside of the industry, outside of the line of work of the business. And the third prong is that the person is customarily engaged in an independent established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. So if someone has a business license to be a catering company, but you're hiring them to do plumbing, I mean, essentially, they don't meet the criteria, right? They have to be an established business within that same work that they are going to perform for you. So if someone meets those criteria, they potentially, and I say potentially, because then we rely on the Borrello test after that, right? So if they are exempt from the ABC test, then now we go to the Borrello test and we say, okay, am I having exertion of control over this worker? Am I telling them when to show up? Am I creating an employer-employee type of relationship?
Now, what seems to be, oh, I'm sorry, let me let you finish.
Oh, yeah. So that's where people can run a little bit into trouble as well, because if you hire an independent contractor and that person truly is an independent contractor, they meet all the criteria of the ABC test and the Borrello test. However, now you're hiring them and you're crossing the line, right? You have an office space for them at your location. They're using your computer and your printer to do work. You have an expected schedule of them. All those things are now crossing the line, and no longer, the line gets blurred as to like whether that person is an independent contractor or it's an employee, because now they're part of kind of the team. They have like their own office set up there. They're using your equipment. They're using your internet. They're using your email. So, that's kind of where people run into trouble. But essentially, what you want to do if someone, or I don't know if that falls, that was what you were going to say, when you want to convert someone to an employee, right? So now they're kind of like, they're kind of like blending in with your workforce, right?
Yeah.
And you want to actually now be in compliance because they kind of are part of your workforce. You can't perform your operations without them. So the best thing to do would be now to convert them to an employee.
Yeah, where we
And
go to
bring
the
them on
0
board.
to 1. And what I was going to mention is, it's the whether they're involved in the usual course of business, which is most problematic for our clients. Now, I don't know if it's still on their website, but I remember when they first came out, they had these examples, and I was shocked because one of them was, if someone is developing a recipe in their home because you're a cake maker and they're giving you the recipe, they have to be an employee because the recipe that you're going to be using is part of the daily functions of creating the cake. And then they said, well, here's an example of when it would be okay to have as an independent contractor. You are making cakes and you have to hire somebody to come in and fix your computer. So it was such a delineation that I recognized early on, most people will not be able to get past B, the usual course of business. And so we had situations like a yoga instructor that just wanted to have somebody come in on a Friday and teach one class so they could take a break and still have the classes offered. But that's still considered an employee because it's the usual course of business. So
Right.
it also opens up this concept we're going to talk about in a minute, which would be seasonal or temporary employees, if you're bringing them in on a temporary basis. Now, a couple of other things I get asked a lot, and I'm just kind of like getting off all the little offshoots of this before we delve into the 0 to 1, is I get a lot of questions, and I don't know how this works either. So I'm going to be educated, and I'm going to bring up staffing agencies. I know sometimes they're okay and sometimes they're not, but I don't understand everything about that. Can you give us some clarity to see if going through a staffing agency resolves this issue for people?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that might be a good way to source, your extra help, right? Your labor force. If you're not quite ready to hire someone, to bring someone aboard and absorb that cost, right? Because we're talking about, it's pretty significant. We're talking about workers' comp insurance, and we're also talking about payroll taxes. So when you go to an employment agency, the employment agency covers that portion, right? Because they are the ones employing the employee. So they are the ones responsible for workers' comp insurance and payroll tax, and a lot of the benefits that employees do have under the law, such as sick leave and anything else. So if you're a business, you're wanting to grow your business, and you're not quite sure if you're ready yet to have that extra cost, you can go to a staffing agency and get temporary help. Get someone to work for you as a temp. However, you don't want this to be a long-term thing, right? Because then now you run into like, okay, now you're kind of become the employer as well.
So you can even cross the line there.
Right, you can cross the line there too, and you can become a co-employer along with the staffing agency for this person. So, it's I would recommend, having a temp 6 months, is usually what's, typical of a temp. If you need to prolong it, maybe extend it a little bit further out to 9 months. But I would say anything, further than that, you don't want to go years
Right.
with having someone as a temp, right? Because
Gotcha.
now, yeah. So that could be a possible solution too. If you're not ready to absorb the cost, you can go to a staffing agency.
Now, in that, I want to ask on this, do you have to be careful about doing your due diligence to make sure that staffing agency is indeed having them as employees? And I ask this question from having experience in the construction business, where
Mhm.
somebody thought they had people as employees, but they really were independent contractors, and
Oh
it
boy.
came back on them because they were still the hiring entity, even though they were hiring the contractor. It didn't go back on the contractor, it came back on them. So that made me start to question, because I question everything to
Mhm.
make sure people are safe. Do you have to do anything to make sure this staffing agency is indeed having these individuals as employers versus independent contractors? The bigger staffing agencies will, but if you're using one of those one-off, do you have to make sure? What's your thoughts on that, or am I being over the board on that?
No, you're not being over the board on that, because that could pose a problem down the road. Like I said, you could, if you become the co-employer, and this person is technically not on the staffing agency's payroll, right? It's not their employee, then you're actually their official employer.
Yeah.
And they get injured on the job. Guess what? They come after you.
That's
You
how
know,
they got caught. That was what happened. They had an
yeah.
injury. And now that you say co-employer, that was the words. They had a workman's comp claim and it came back on the hiring people from the contractor. That,
Yeah.
usually that's what happens is
Mhm.
something affects a trigger which causes an audit or looking into it. And injury is one of those types of situations that takes it to the top and has it looked at immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no minimum time period. Like I can't say, oh, I only had to hire them once because I went on vacation and that was only a one-time thing. According to the law, it's any hiring, any moment of time is
Mhm.
just to kind of get a parameter on this. And
Right.
there's not too much of a distinction on, well, this person knows how to do this better than I. If it's part of the usual course of business, it's the usual course of business. It's not like you said with the plumber, that's could be considered a specialty, but really it was not even considered a specialty in that.
Right, right. So yeah, so it is important for small business to do their due diligence when hiring staff from staffing agency. I would ask for their copy of the workers' comp insurance
Right.
certificate.
There you go.
Yeah, I would ask also, for them to show you all the new hire paperwork for this person, right? Because on there, it's going to tell them, and we'll get into it. I mean, down the road of like what it's like to onboard someone, but on there, there's this form called wage theft notice to employee that's required by the state of California. And essentially that form, picture like an offer letter on like a form format. And
Okay.
it tells it, the whole intention is to tell the employee, let them know who the employer is, the legal name of the employer, and what their wage is going to be, the rate of pay, either salary, and the workers' comp insurance information of the employer. So I would ask for that form, or ask for, for all the new hire paperwork for this person, as proof that they actually are indeed being onboarded through the staffing agency. Yeah.
Because I was talking with somebody, I said, I think you should check something. I'm not sure what you should ask for, but now it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense because when you hire a contractor for big bids, they have to show you the workman's comp, and that's going to help you
Mhm.
understand. So that's a safeguard. Okay, before we get into this, I think we need to also address salary, because too many people think they can kind of just bring somebody on as a salary. And I am always shocked to see how the requirements for a salary versus an hourly payer, how strict they are, that you really do have to have,
Mhm.
especially, and you'll talk to it, this one where I'm gonna say it wrong tomorrow, but you'll know where I'm going with this. But they almost have to have like a financial skin in the game on the decision, like the decisions they make could have a financial bearing on the company type thing. So talk about what is the basic requirements for me to have somebody as a salaried person versus an hourly
Mhm.
person, and then we're going to get into the onboarding.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is actually you're right on track, because this is going to be one of the first things employers need to do when you convert an independent contractor, or when you bring someone on board to the job, to determine, what type of classification they have for this position. Is this an hourly employee, or could this be a salaried employee? And to classify someone as salary, there are certain criteria that need to be met. One of them is that they have to make at least twice the state's minimum wage.
Okay.
Okay, so right now we are at about 66,500 and some dollars, that someone as an exempt salary employee can make. Okay, so that's part one. The second portion of it is, as you were mentioning, is the job duties test. So only certain positions and certain job duties classify as someone being classified as salary exempt. There are certain criteria for executive professionals, for licensed professionals, for salespeople, for computer professionals. But essentially, you want to look at, whether, like, so for the executive exemption, for example, as you were talking, you want to look at, does this person manage the entire enterprise? Are they able to make decisions on policies and financial decisions of the company? Are they in charge of managing or administering the business in any sense? Or do they have independent judgment in their position? Are they able to exercise that? So those are things you want to look at. And when you look at those things too, the next question is, do they perform these job duties at least 51% of the time? Okay. So those, in a nutshell, like kind of the criteria to classify someone as exempt. And when we say exempt, we are talking about them being exempt from overtime and a lot of the wage and hour laws that provide protections to hourly workers. So we're talking about meal periods, we're talking about rest breaks, overtime, double time, all those protections that are stipulated by the law for hourly employees.
And that's the why I bring it up, because some people think perhaps maybe the salary option helps, because then they don't have to worry about the expense of an overtime and the meals and everything that comes into play. So that's why I intertwine that in. So as we leave AB5, I think what we need to at least address, or at least mention, is the hefty fines if you do get a judgment against you. And Xiomara, I always like to talk about and explain precedents, because really when a law comes into play, a lot of people don't realize that we can't really say how the law is going to be judged in the courts if there's not a lot of precedents. So when right, for me personally, and this is my opinion, I feel like AB5's got a vagueness without a lot of precedents, and we don't quite know where it's gonna go. So can you address the fines and the concept of the precedents? And we're kind of guessing a little, and that's my words, so I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's my thoughts on it. You give us some information on what I just spoke about.
Yeah, so I mean, this is serious stuff, and I think the reason why you and I keep talking about it is because we realize that, look, a lot of people are not aware of the consequences of not complying. But to start out with, there could be a fine of at least $5,000 up to $25,000 per violation of AB5. And in addition to that, we have like violations of pretty much every employment law, right? Because if you have people as independent contractors, you don't have workers' comp insurance, which is, now at least a $10,000 penalty for that. You're not providing them paid sick leave as mandated by the state, which is potentially another $4,000 penalty for that. You're probably not having them comply with meal and rest periods, right? Which can be an hour at the employee's hourly regular rate of pay that you owe them for every single day that they were not provided a meal period under the law. And the same thing for rest breaks, right? So every 4 hours or a major fraction thereof, employees are entitled to take a 10-minute rest break. And when you don't provide that, you also owe them another hour of, potentially the regular rate of pay. So, I mean, we talk about all those things, any overtime that could potentially be owed. It adds up.
It
It
does.
adds,
It could break a company. And I don't know if you know this or not, this answer, I don't know, but I'm assuming, okay, Lori doesn't know, she's saying assuming, okay, mayday, mayday, that if you then are forced to file bankruptcy, this possibly could go to civil liability because it's breaking these employment laws. So it's not like a bankruptcy is going to get you out of this. This stays with you, the person. Am I correct in my assumption?
Yeah, and recently we have had, I mean, these are kind of like the laws we don't really talk about a lot, but recently there's been laws that have passed to give the labor commissioner more power to go after people, for not complying with the law, and also, sort of like, the people that have like no skin in the game, right? The people that are like, well, I don't own anything, so you
Right.
can't come after me.
Right.
So now the labor commissioner has additional authority to actually go after those kind of people that may owe penalties, may be fined and sanctioned, but they're looking to kind of be bailed out because there's really not much you can do because I don't own any property, I don't own anything, nothing's under my name. So I mean, there are I would say checks and balances now, more so to enforce this. And the enforcement of AB 5, this independent contractor law, now extends to local jurisdictions, to the DA, so they can also issue penalties. And yeah, they can actually come after businesses and things. How likely they are to do that right now, I don't know. I mean, they're pretty busy, right?
Right.
As
Right.
it already is. But I mean, I wouldn't put it past anyone. I wouldn't want to be, the first one to be, the case to
Yeah.
go through something like that.
And I say that because I hear too many people say to me, well, I'm going to become incorporated to protect myself. And I have to explain to them that there's such a thing as civil liabilities, payroll, this being one of them,
Mhm.
product liability. Don't get this impression that this is a protection of all. And I want to make a clarity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we now know what is causing many people to go from 0 to 1. Now, what we're about to talk about may also be that somebody's having to hire more than one employee. I'm just using the 0, 1. And what I spoke about earlier on the financial end, I want to make sure it's a point that it might be that you already hired employees, but you're dealing with the wage increase and having to look at it financially. So, Xiomara, I'm going to
Mhm.
hand it on to you. Please do mention any other laws that you want us to know about that happened in January, the wage increase, and then start to walk us through this 0 to 1 situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So minimum wage did increase to $16 an hour in California now. That went from $15.50 to $16 for all size employers. So previously we had like smaller employers, and larger employers. Now everybody's under the same umbrella. And you and I talk about that. There's no such thing as like really a small business in California. So the law applies to everybody. And then, keep in mind, as we're talking about salaried employees, right? Because now you have to comply with the minimum salary as well. And every time the minimum wage goes up, also the minimum salary is going to go up because it's twice the state's minimum wage as well. So what it's looking like to bring someone on board, 0 to 1, right? So now you are ready to convert your employees or your independent contractors into W-2 employees. What should be your first step? So first step would be, number 1, look for workers' comp insurance, right? Okay. So that's the law. Every employer needs to have workers' comp insurance for at least, even if you have just one employee, that law applies to you. Secondly, you would need to classify those positions, right? As we're talking about, are they exempt or are they hourly? What type of salary or what type of pay you're going to provide to them. Number 3 would be you are actually needing to register as an employer because now you're becoming an employer. So you need to set up an account with EDD, and you also need to do this with the IRS, so that you can be remitting payroll taxes to them and satisfy the requirements of complying with that. So that's on a quarterly basis. You're going to be remitting payroll tax to EDD. And also you're going to be providing information as to the wages you pay the employees. And, this is an important connection to make, because when people are independent contractors, they're not eligible for benefits through the state, right? Because they're not contributing. They're not contributing to state disability. They're not contributing to pay family leave. They're not contributing. So they are not eligible. And, they're not eligible for unemployment insurance either. So that's kind of been like, that was kind of like the trigger of a lot of audits back when COVID-19 was in place, because people were now that were independent contractors, they were able to qualify under the pandemic unemployment assistance program. And now they were putting, well, I work for this employer, or I work at that employer. But essentially, when you hire someone, you are actually reporting to EDD their wages. So EDD can determine, should that person ever file for unemployment? Should they ever file for disability or for paid family leave, wage replacement benefits? EDD is able to go back and say, oh, let's see, business ABC has reported that this person makes this much, and so they're eligible for this much, of benefits through disability or whatever it may be. So that would be the second thing, making sure that you're complying with that, with the payroll taxes, also remitting those to the IRS. And, when you want to bring this person on board, you're going to go through the new hire process, what we know as in HR as the new hire process, which
Before we go to the new hire, can I back up for a second? So if I
Sure.
hire an ADP for payroll, do they set up the EDD accounts and everything on my behalf, so I don't have to do that? Like, how much of that portion that you're talking about, Xiomara, if we use like an ADP or a Paycheck, and I only mention them because I'm very particular to
Yeah.
using a reputable firm because of the liability, but will that offset some of that EDD filing the forms? I know it will, but I don't know if you still have to set up the account yourself with
Yeah.
EDD. I think they do it on your behalf. You fill that in.
Well, it depends on the company. A lot of the companies would still have the business owner set up the account, and then they kind of take over and manage it for them. So they'll be remitting the payroll taxes on behalf of on behalf of the business. But I believe most of the time the business still has to create the account directly with EDD.
Okay, gotcha. I wasn't sure because I couldn't recall that, but nevertheless, the forms and everything can be then averted with the payroll company, but you need to get and set up the accounts with EDD. Gotcha.
Right.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we got that clear, because some people don't realize what the payroll company will do and what they won't do. So that's why I jumped into that. So now let's go to our onboarding list, because I know this one has things that people are probably not thinking about.
Yeah, so with the onboarding, right? So when you are converting, either hiring a new employee or converting an independent contractor, there are certain forms that are required by both federal and state and brochures and pamphlets and posters that are required. But first things first, you're going to want to have them complete the employment eligibility verification form, which is AKA known as the I-9 form. Through the USCIS. So that is what that essentially does, is that every employer in the United States is required to verify that a person is eligible and authorized to work in the United States. So that would be first things first, right? Because if someone's not authorized to work, then you don't need to go through the trouble of going through all the rest of the onboarding.
And they just updated that I-9, and they're coming on that pretty hard too, aren't they? Am I right about that as well? That's not a simple form. That's been really highlighted a lot lately.
You are dangerous, Lori. I don't forget how you say, I know enough to be dangerous, but you
I
are
do.
dangerous.
I do. I do. I know. I literally do. I don't know how I gained. I always tell when people say, "How do you know so much?" I'm old. I've been on planet Earth for a long time, and I'm involved in so many things. That's why. But yes, I do know that was, I think, last year that they updated,
Yes.
and they're really hot on the trail for that form as
Yeah,
well.
a lot of times employers don't realize the form has an expiration date.
Yep.
So if you take a look at the top right corner of the form and then the bottom left corner of the form, it tells you the expiration date on the top and it tells you the last publication date on the bottom. So it was updated August last year. So it's really nice, actually. I like it a lot because before it was like one form for the employee, one form for the employer. And now we've kind of gone back to the original form, how it was, about half a page for the employee to fill out, half a page for the employer to fill out, and it's all in one page. So I like that. I like that update. But they also updated a couple other things. You know, people are now able to remotely onboard people and view the documents.
Okay.
And there's more things like that. But that the I-9 form could be like its own, I think like its own webinar or so. I mean, it does come with like
Yes.
a 300 and some page manual for
It is,
anyone
because I
who's
dealt with somebody
interested.
with an I-9s with employees in other states, and they didn't have somebody out there to sit down across from the person. And so we were
Mhm.
looking in the new ability to Zoom and try to get the I-9
Yeah,
filled out that
yeah,
way. Yeah, that's
yeah,
a whole bear. And keep in mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, ADP don't touch that. You've got to touch the I-9. You're on your own, guys.
right,
Or if you
right,
hire somebody in to do it. But
right.
I just don't want you to think that that's ADP. We're talking about this is on you to do the I-9.
Right. ADP might provide the form,
Or,
make it available on the platform. And a lot of the payroll companies will do this. They'll make all these required forms available for the employees to fill out. But at the end of the day, it really is you as the employer or business owner to make sure these forms are filled out correctly.
yep.
So that's the I-9 form. The other forms that you'll need to have the employees fill out are going to be the tax withholding forms. So the W-4 for federal taxes and the DE-4 for California state taxes. So those two are required to, as well to have. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the wage theft and employment notice to employee. So that form essentially that needs to be customized for every employee, because you need to provide the actual pay rate, and you need to provide you need to provide information that is specific to that particular employee.
Okay.
So those are the main requirements as far as forms that need to be filled out. I know that there may be other forms that you may want the employees to fill out as best practices, such as like an emergency contact. If you have an employee manual, you want them to acknowledge that employee
Employee
manual.
manual mandatory, Xiomara? I don't know if it is or not. I don't know the answer.
That's a trick question, Lori.
Oh, I'm sorry. I always ask it because that's what I've heard it is, and then I've heard it's not. And I'm like, okay, that's one of those.
Okay, so short answer is no. It's not
Okay.
required by law, but long answer, certain policies are required to be provided to employees.
Okay.
So such as, which leads, kind of segue to my next step, right? So the forms and brochures and posters that you're required to provide to the employees. So required to provide them sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation, prevention policy that every employer should have. I know the law applies to employers with 5 or more employees, but it's always best practice to have that and provide that. And actually the employee count, it's not just employees, but it's just anyone that works or that has contact in your workplace. So if you hire independent contractors, if you yourself are, as a business owner, are at the workplace, it's anyone that comes in contact within the workplace. You have 5 people around in your workplace or that work together, interact at some point, the law applies to you. So along with that is the policy, right? So and the other policy that's required is the lactation accommodation policy. Believe it or not, that's the law. Every employer needs to provide that policy to all new hires. And then we have several other policies, right? So some policies say, well, if you provide a policy manual or you provide policies to your employees, then then you should have a policy about this law and provide it to them as well. So that's where I say like yes and no about the employee handbook, because for example, the California Family Rights Act, and that applies to employers with 5 or more employees. If you didn't know, that went into effect a couple of years ago. But that's a policy that's required to be provided if you provide other policies, which by the law, you are required to provide other policies. So that one is required as well to be provided. And yeah, we have other brochures such as the workers' comp pamphlet that comes with several forms that need to be provided to the employee, not necessarily be filled out, but they need to be provided to them just in case they want to pre-designate their medical physician, the chiropractor, or acupuncturist in case of an injury at work. So if they do pre-designate one, then you as the employer cannot send them to your network under the workers' comp insurance. They will actually go to their pre-designated physician. Disability insurance pamphlet, paid family leave pamphlet, sexual harassment pamphlet, rights of victims notice, and there's also from EDD. There's also the brochure that provides it's called For Your Benefit. It's a little pamphlet, talks about all the different protections for employees. And there's a myriad of posters also that are required to be provided, or you're required to actually have in a conspicuous place at your workplace. And I know someone's going to ask the question, what if we all work remotely?
Yeah, I was going to get
So now you're actually allowed to provide those electronically. The state actually did pass a law like last year, or was it 2 years ago, where they actually do now allow the posters to be provided electronically, but you still got to comply with with the federal postings as well. So best thing to do if you are remote is to have like a binder with all the posters, in addition to, potentially having them like in a shared drive or something.
On a website too. I've seen people with a private shared, private entrance website, and they've posted them on the website. That's okay too, right?
That is okay. Yeah. So as long as the employees have access to the posters, access to be able to read about their rights, that is fine. And then last thing I want to talk about is the wage order. That's also something that's required to be posted along with your postings. It's basically the wage order. California has 17 wage orders, and what a wage order is, in case you were not familiar, it basically is like the wage and hour Bible of how you're going to compensate your employees based on your industry for overtime, double time, all those hourly protections to employees, meal periods, rest periods, so that is like what dictates how you compensate workers and the working conditions that you should provide as an employer. And that needs to be also posted for them to read. It will be good for you to read as well, so you're familiar with what applies and what doesn't apply. And if you're in an area that has their own ordinance for minimum wage or paid sick leave, you are going to be required to provide to have postings about that minimum wage and paid sick leave requirements.
Okay, so first of all, everybody in the audience right now with me, let's all take a deep breath. Ready? Oh, I can see their faces. I can't see their faces, but I can see their faces.
I know.
Okay, so First of all, thank you for all that. I know you guys are as overwhelmed as I was, and I know it, right? So backing up a little bit, I want to just, as we got some time, and I want to get into a few questions, but I want to make some points on things. There was a question, and this is Lori's opinion. This is Lori's opinion, not our sponsors. This is Lori's opinion, asking about ADP and paycheck, which of them, and, kind of why am I saying this? And the reason I'm not an ADP fan. It's not like I think they're great. The reason is, the laws we're talking about for me is in California, and ADP have reps specific to the state that they assign to the person when they sign up. I think Paychex does it a little bit as well. And so I've seen like Gusto and stuff, they don't know the California laws. And so they're not
Mhm,
advising, and California laws just are their own little animal. So that's why I've been a fan of
mhm,
ADP or Paycheck, because of the crucial aspect of what we're speaking of.
mhm.
And I even know like ADP has one of the standard websites with all the posters that you can get access to when you're with them. So, that's my reasoning for saying all the time ADP and Paychecks. I'll hand it to you for any thoughts on what I just said.
Yeah, I mean, there is a myriad of payroll companies out there, and I do agree with you. ADP is the one that's been around the longest, I would say. So they sort of like know the game, if
Yeah.
you will. They know the rules to the game, and yeah. But there's also other companies. I one thing I would focus on, right? So if you're looking to outsource your payroll, you want to check out a couple of things. So you want to check out their system, that it is in compliance with the law. So for example, if you do get like a timekeeping app through the payroll company, you want to make sure that it does account for meal periods, that it provides there is like a little certification that employees, like they call it an attestation at the end of the meal period, where they basically are acknowledging, yes, I was provided, I was relieved and provided the time to take my meal in rest periods. You want to have that, especially here in California, because meal periods is the most contentious
Yeah.
part of the law. I mean, there's a lawsuit or two or three or four every single year about meal periods here in California. So you want to check for that. And you want to see also about their customer service, right? So if you're able to get a hold of someone, you're able to rely on them to process your quarterly taxes, right? And you as the business owner too should be checking on those things, right? So every quarter you should be asking them, okay, can you share with me the taxes that were remitted to EDD and to the IRS, and what was paid to Social Security, all those things. You should be keeping tabs on that. Spot
Please
check
note what you
for
just,
invoices.
that's so important what you just said. I want to make sure the audience understands that, because so many people hire these without checking on them, and you should do your own audit and make sure the numbers, at least learn how to do that. I
Yeah.
had a situation with somebody, I'm not a big fan of QuickBooks payroll. They really don't have all the systems in place, but they didn't check the
Mhm.
numbers. The payroll was not submitted properly, and they didn't catch it, and they have a lien against their house as well as their daughter, because
Oh no.
participating in the payroll. Yeah, and what happened is they
Yeah.
collected on 10, but it only got submitted on 9. I don't know if they made a mistake when they set up the
Yeah.
software or anything, but once again, ADP catches that stuff. I've worked with ADP a lot because of my bigger turnarounds, and I've
Mhm.
relied on them. And we come in and go, okay, I got to see what the past owner's done, and they've alerted me.
Yeah.
That's why I'm specific on them. A quick question: what are the hours for minimum part-time? What are they in California now? We got somebody asking that, and I don't even know that.
So there is actually no law that stipulates, like, this is a part-time classification. So anything less than 40 in a week would be considered part-time.
Okay, I
But
got it.
that would be for the employer to actually define, what do you consider part-time? One last thing I want to leave, as we're talking about the payroll tax and quarterly taxes and all those reports. I know we're out of time, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that there are certain percentages that you pay for unemployment insurance, for training tax. That is all on the payroll tax, and so become familiar with what those rates are for you, so that you know that you're getting charged correctly. By, you don't want to get charged an extra 5% of tax, when you're actually, what applies to you is a lot less than what the payroll company may be charging you. So do become familiar with that. Unemployment tax, I think for starters, is about 3.4%.
Yeah.
SDI, state disability, is at like a 1.1%, and then the training tax is a 0.01%, something like that. But do
Got the
become
right numbers.
familiar with
Yep.
yeah, do become familiar with those rates. And your unemployment rate may fluctuate after a few years, depending on claims that you may have for unemployment as well. It just works like any other insurance. So yeah, that's kind of where I've seen other employers kind of overpay because they're not on top of those rates. And so the payroll company will come and say, okay, well, we're charging you like a 10% or 12% of tax because that. And if you don't know your taxes, then you're gonna not be able to negotiate with them. So
Yeah, and we're going to go over a little bit, and I knew that, I'm making an executive decision because this is one of those hot topics. And so, and it's so true because so many people get their documents from their payroll company and they don't go through them. I've been spending time with the SBD clients where I say, send me the documents. We're going to do a screenshot and I'm going to walk you through how to read them, what they mean, because it's really crucial. Because at the end of the day, it comes back on it comes back on you. Now, several people in the audience were asking things like, well, it seems like it's better to have somebody in an hour. I've had office people. It seems like it'd be better for an hour. I want to answer that there's not better. It's the law. Like a lot of times people will say, what is better? And I try to get them out of the word better. It's like, you have to meet this criteria for the salary. The criteria is pretty hard. Most people that are just hiring one person, they're probably not going to meet the salary criteria because they're not overseeing anything.
yeah.
So there's not a better. It's either you fit the criteria or you're not. But I find most small companies, they're probably more than likely going to have to fit within the hourly. Just as a generic, please, I always tell you, override anything I said incomplete. But what's your thoughts on answering that in general? Because I'm getting a lot of questions on that.
Yeah, I mean, hourly employees, mainly for people that do manual work, right? So in salary, if I had to summarize it, right? So hourly employees are, hourly rates are for people that are doing mostly manual work. Salary employees are, people that are doing more type of, intellectual work, or, they're using their knowledge to be able to do their work, right? So, the best thing to do if you're not sure whether this person should be salary or whether this person will be hourly, if you meet the criteria, would be to classify them as hourly employees, because you don't want to run into the issue where you didn't pay them overtime, you didn't provide them meal and rest periods, and now here you are, maybe someone, knocking on wood, filing a claim against you, and now you go back up to 3 years of owing them all those wages, right? And plus penalties. One thing I do want to clarify is that you cannot classify a part-time employee as salary, even if they meet the criteria of the minimum wage and the duties test. If they are part-time, they must be an hourly employee.
Gotcha. Here's another one of those quick trick questions. I'll give you my answer to it. Okay. One of the people in the audience asked such a good question. Here I'm getting ready to hire somebody. Where do I become aware of all this? And I get asked this a lot too with tax and legal. And although I would love to say, here's a check box and here's this list you can download, no such thing exists or will ever exist, because the way I explain it in my world is you've got all these different agencies with their own rules, and they're making little rules and they're changing, and this is coming. So nobody even has a list, because the minute you do, it could change. So the best thing is to make sure, if you have no knowledge of it, hire reputable organizations. Attend some of these webinars, like I know EDD has training webinars and stuff like that, right from the government's mouth, so to speak. But where would you go with that question as well?
Yeah, I'm actually So we do have a webinar
I was
tomorrow
going to
about
ask you that. Yes, please.
independent contractors, but talking about employee laws. So I always recommend, clients that reach out to attend free webinars that EDD hosts along in collaboration with the Department of Industrial Relations. They have these wonderful seminars where they talk about everything wage and hour, payroll processing. They get you familiar with all the rules and regulations that are applicable. And I would say, there is not an actual checklist out there because, as I mentioned before, there are 17 wage orders in California. And so it depends on your industry. And some industries, although a lot of those laws apply across the board, some industries do have specific regulations that apply to them. So I would say that's probably why there isn't a checklist out there. But you also want to check out the Department of Industrial Relations website. They're a great resource for employers. You can find the posters there that I talked about. Check out EDD. They do have, like I mentioned, a lot of webinars that you can attend for free. And other than that, reach out to SBDC. We're here to help as well.
Absolutely. Now you're having a webinar through Pasadena SBDC tomorrow?
Yes. We are having a webinar about, we're going to take a deep dive into the independent contractors. So if you would like to learn more about that, feel free to join. It's at 10 a.m. I can share
You
the
have to,
link.
I was gonna say, can you, I don't think Annie's here. Can you get the link in the chat for everybody?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yeah,
While you're doing that, I'm gonna answer a few questions that are really on another topic. So Kim talks about being a single member LLC. I do not plan on taking a salary at first. When applying for my business license within my city, I was required to say one employee, me. Would I be considered an employee with EDD and IRS? I want to attach that because guys, when you're an LLC, you are known as a member. You are not an employee only if you are an S Corp or taxed as an S Corp or a corporation, okay? So don't get confused. Don't think you're going to take a W-2. It does not work that way. If you have any questions on that, take my webinar on legal structures because this is a key point. So when you apply for a business license, sometimes it does say, depending on the locality, do you have any employees, including the owner? And they'll check it, right, for the owner. But if they're asking, do you intend to hire an employee? That is not you, okay? That's an employee outside of you. So no, you are not registered with EDD. You are not registered with IRS. And once again, as an LLC, you are a self-employed person considered with the IRS. You are a member. You do not take a salary check. You do not take a W-2. If you need more information on that, reach out to Lauren and she'll have an appointment with me to explain that in detail. But that was a confusion and I wanted to make sure I grabbed at that one. Here's one last one, Xiomara, if I'm not messing you up by doing two things at once. If you register an employee with EDD, you then, if you don't have that employee, you have to either close the EDD account if you're not having any more employees, I believe. Do you have to say that person's no longer an employee? I don't know what the dissolution process with EDD is when you no longer have an employee. I've only worked with it when you are literally closing the company.
Yeah, so you would need to notify EDD that you no longer have an employee and they should be able to close that account.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Okay, and one last one, Christine, you're writing about FinCEN, and no, please, guys, this is Christine's, the first one in the Q&A. She's been trying to fill out the form. She said a company keeps offering her to file it for $199. Guys, no, you don't need to spend money on these companies trying to fill out this form for you. I will be going through the form with you in the next couple sessions and try to keep bringing you up to date on that. That's the beneficial ownership information form I talked about earlier. But Christine, you don't have to get the ID. You'll see on that link that I had Lauren put in. Lauren put that in again for us. There's two choices. One is to get an ID and one is to fill out the form without the ID. Just fill it out without. Christine, you have any problems, you get in touch with Lauren or get in touch with me. I think you have my email. I'll walk you through it online. Phew, Xiomara, many thanks to you. Did we just
You're welcome.
we just tried to, guys, we just tried to tackle a lot today. We really
We
did.
did.
We don't want to overwhelm you, but I would say, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, and I think I'm okay saying this, Samara, you and I are the same. We just want to keep you safe. We
Yeah.
want to support you, and we want to keep you safe. And I've been saying lately, there is no such thing as a small business anymore. And
Mhm.
and you get what I'm saying. Yeah, there's small
Mhm.
businesses, but when it comes to law and regulations, there is no such thing anymore as a small business. So we're not trying to scare you. We're trying to help you to be informed. Samara, you already know I'm going to ask you to come back on. Annie, I saw you were there.
Be
You
my
put
pleasure.
Samara's webinar. Thank you guys. It's in the chat. The link for Samara's webinar tomorrow. Like I always say, I know a lot of HR people. I don't know anyone that is as thorough as you. Once I knew that you were brought on at Pasadena SBDC, I was like, oh my God, we got a gem here. I've told them how
Thank
many
you.
times, and I tell you that we got a gem, and I am going to have you on my show continuously until you say no.
Thank you. No, it's my pleasure. I love coming on. Like I said, I do resonate because I do, out of the goodness of my heart, I want every business to be safe. I don't want, I want you guys to make a profit and also keep that profit, not have to pay penalties and, all those things because you were not in the know and you were not in compliance. So we did cover a lot today. I probably could have gone on for another hour, but I don't want to overwhelm people. It is a lot. It is a lot. So if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. I did share the link for the posters someone was asking about. And thank you, Lori. It's always a pleasure to be on. Look forward to
Thank
coming
you.
on next time.
And I tell everybody, don't be, what is the old saying, penny wise and pound foolish? I think I got that saying right. When it comes to finance, tax, HR, legal, invest money on these things, buying qualified
Mhm.
people, qualified companies to help you with this. Save money by doing your own little stick selfie for your Instagram account, right? But don't save it on this. So first
Yes.
of all, we got to say, Lauren, thank you. I know you were not feeling well and you have maintained the chat the entire time. I saw you there. Thank you, Lauren. You get to the doctor and get feeling better. Samara, there she is. Lots of love, everybody. Love to
Lauren,
Lauren. There, she's
she's
showing us
hanging
her
in there.
face. Okay. You go get better. We want to hear you next time. Okay. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you,
Thank
Samara.
you, everybody. You're
Lauren's
welcome.
going to stay on and she's going to be behind the scenes, guys. If you missed the link, she'll be here. So if you want to get anything, get in touch with me, get in touch with Samara. Annie's there. Everybody's there. So we'll be staying. Samara and I are going to go take a nap now.
Replenish my coffee.
Exactly. Much thanks to you. Much thanks to the audience, our frequent flyers, and everybody who comes here every week to see Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.